A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. I was watching that Anthropic computer use demo again this morning. You know, the one where the agent bookings a flight by clicking through the website like a person would. And it hit me. Why are we doing this? I mean, I have Claude Code sitting in my terminal, and with the right Modal Context Protocol tools, it can basically do the same thing via API calls or a headless browser without ever needing to see a pixel.
It's a classic architectural fork in the road. Corn, Herman Poppleberry here, and I have been diving deep into the white papers on this exact tension. Today's prompt from Daniel really nails the question: is computer use a distinct product category that's here to stay, or is it just a high-latency, expensive bridge to a world where everything is an API? We've got this explosion of dedicated agents like OpenAI Operator, Google Mariner, and Microsoft UFO, but then you've got the absorbers like Claude Code and Open Interpreter that treat visual interaction as a last resort.
It feels a bit like watching someone use a robot arm to type on a keyboard, instead of just plugging in a USB cable. It's impressive to watch, but you have to wonder about the efficiency. By the way, for those keeping track at home, today's episode is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash. It's writing the script while we provide the brotherly wisdom and the occasional sloth-based snark.
The robot arm analogy is actually closer to the truth than most people realize. When you look at the visual first camp, think Anthropic computer use or ADEPT's ACT. 1. The model is literally looking at screenshots. It's taking a PNG, running it through a vision encoder, identifying the X and Y coordinates of a button, and then simulating a mouse click. It's human-centric by design. But then you have the protocol first camp, where the agent is looking at the DOM tree, the HTML, or hitting a REST API directly.
Right, and the cost difference has to be astronomical. Processing a high-resolution screenshot every few seconds just to find a submit button? That's a lot of tokens. I saw some data suggesting that running a task via Visual Agent can be 4 to 10 times more expensive than using a CLI-based agent. Is the cool factor of seeing a cursor move across the screen blinded us to the fact that it's a total resource hog?
It's definitely a factor. If you're Anthropic or OpenAI, you want that wow moment in the keynote. Seeing an AI navigate a website like a human is visceral. It feels like the future. But from an engineering perspective, it's incredibly brittle. If a pop-up ad appears or the CSS layout shifts by 10 pixels, a coordinate-based visual agent can trip over its own shoelaces. A tool-equipped agent using something like Playwright or a dedicated MCP server for Google Sheets doesn't care what the UI looks like. It's talking to the data.
So why are we seeing so much investment in it? Google has Project Mariner, which is supposedly this Chrome-first agent for enterprise workflows. Microsoft has UFO, specifically for navigating the labyrinth of Windows and Office 365. Are they just hedging their bets, or is there a legacy long tail that I'm underestimating?
That legacy tail is more like a legacy whale, Corn. Think about the software that actually runs the world. It's not all pretty React apps with clean APIs. It's SAP installations from the late 90s, proprietary CAD tools, government portals that haven't been updated since the Bush administration, and specialized industrial software. Those systems will never have a modern API. If you want to automate them, you either hire 1,000 humans or you build an agent that can see the screen.
Okay, I'll give you the legacy systems, but even then, isn't computer use just a feature? Like, why is OpenAI Operator a whole separate thing? If I'm using a general-purpose assistant, I just want it to be able to use the computer when it needs to. I don't want to switch to my computer use agent like I'm switching from a screwdriver to a jackhammer.
That's the OCR argument Daniel mentioned. Remember when optical character recognition was a standalone software category? You'd buy a specific program just to turn a scanned image into text. Now OCR is just a library. It's built into your camera app, your PDF reader, your note-taking app. It stopped being a product and became a capability. I suspect we're seeing the same thing with computer use. Right now, it's a standalone demo because the latency and the model requirements are so high it needs its own dedicated architecture. But in 18 months, it's just another tool in the belt.
Let's get into the weeds on the architecture for a second, because I think that's where the aha moment is. If I'm using Anthropic's computer use, what is actually happening under the hood compared to, say, me using Claude Code with a browser tool?
The visual first approach is an iterative feedback loop of see, think, act. Step 1, take a screenshot. Step 2, feed that screenshot into a vision language model. Step 3, the model outputs a JSON object with a command like move mouse to coordinates 500, 600. Step 4, the system executes that click. Step 5, take another screenshot to see if the click worked. If you're booking a flight, that might be 15 or 20 cycles of screenshots.
And if it's a slow-loading site, the agent is just sitting there burning tokens on screenshots of a loading spinner?
Precisely. Well, not precisely, I'm not allowed to say that, but you're on the money. Contrast that with an API first agent using something like the Model Context Protocol. If the agent needs to add a row to a spreadsheet, it sends a structured data packet directly to the service. One call, one response. 0 pixels processed. Even when it uses a browser, an agent like OpenAI Operator, which is kind of a hybrid, can often bypass the visual rendering and just interact with the accessibility tree or the DOM. It's much more stable because it's not guessing where the button is based on a picture, it knows exactly where the button is in the code.
It sounds like the visual first agents are essentially RPA+. Robotic process automation has been around for years, but it was always so rigid. You'd record a macro, and if the screen resolution changed, the whole thing broke. Now, we're just using LLMs to make those macros smart, enough to handle a bit of visual noise, but it still feels like a workaround for a lack of connectivity.
It's a bridge, but here's where the visual side genuinely wins, and I think this is why Apple is leaning so hard into it with their on-device agents. Privacy. If you're Apple, you have all these apps on a user's iPhone that don't necessarily want to share their full database via an API for security reasons. But the agent has screen awareness. It can see what you're looking at in messages, cross-reference it with a calendar app, and offer a suggestion without needing a deep back-end integration between those two third-party developers.
That's a fair point. If the protocol doesn't exist because of a moat or a privacy wall, the pixel is the only universal interface we have left. It's the lowest common denominator. But man, it's a messy one. I was looking at some of the open source projects like SkyPilot and Open Interpreter. They seem to be taking the CLI first approach, where they try to execute a Python script or a shell command to do the task, and they only spawn a visual window if they hit a wall. That feels like the more elegant path.
It's the hybrid model, and I think that's the winner. You start with the most efficient structured method. If you can use a hescurl command or a SQL query, you do that. If you need to interact with a web service, you use a headless browser and act on the HTML. Only when you're faced with a literal black box UI like a Flash app from 2005 or a heavy desktop client do you fire up the vision model and start clicking coordinates.
So, looking at the market right now, who's actually winning the efficiency battle? I saw that the Writer's Action Agent recently took the lead on the GAIA benchmark, the General AI Assistance benchmark. From what I understand, they're focusing more on doing tasks in real-world environments rather than just being a chatty assistant.
Writer is an interesting case because they are very focused on the enterprise. In a corporate environment, reliability is everything. You can't have an agent that hallucinates a button and clicks on a delete all icon by mistake. Their approach, and the approach of companies like Multion, is to create a programmable agent substrate. Instead of just a chatbot that can use a computer, the agent is Sue, the interface. You tell it the goal, and it navigates the browser layers with a level of precision that pure screenshot and click models struggle with.
It's funny you mention hallucinating buttons. I saw a clip of an early computer use agent trying to fill out a form, and it got stuck in a loop because it kept clicking a cancel button that looked like a submit button to its vision encoder. It spent 3 minutes and probably $10 in tokens just canceling its own work. If it had been looking at the HTML, it would have seen the IDID submit button tag, and been done in a millisecond.
That's the core of the pixel versus protocol debate. Pixels are deceptive. Protocols are definitive. But the world is built for humans, and humans use pixels. I think we're going to see a split in the computer use category. One side will be specialized for QA testing and accessibility. If you're a developer at a company like Google or Meta, you want an agent that uses the pixels because you need to know if the UI is actually usable for a human. You want to know if the button is too small or if the color contrast is off.
Right, so computer use as a testing tool makes perfect sense. It's an automated user acceptance tester that never sleeps and doesn't complain about the coffee. But for productivity or automation, it just feels like we're taking the long way home. If I want to automate my expense reports, I don't want an AI to open a browser, log in, find the upload button, and wait for the file picker. I want it to hit the SAP API and be done with it.
And that's where things like the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, come in. Anthropic actually released that alongside their computer use capability, which is a bit of a mixed signal. On one hand, they're saying, look, we can click buttons. And on the other hand, they're giving us a standard protocol to bypass the buttons entirely. It's like they're providing the horse and the car at the same time.
Maybe they know the horse is temporary. It gets you through the muddy parts where there are no roads yet. The legacy software. But they're building the infrastructure for the car. I wonder if we'll look back on OpenAI Operator as the Netscape of agents. It's the first big flashy window into this world, but the real value ends up being the underlying protocols that let everything talk to each other without the visual overhead.
There's also the agentic CLI movement. We talked about this a bit in the context of projects like Allama, or the rise of harnesses. If you have a powerful enough model running in a terminal, and it has pseudo access to a sandboxed environment, it can theoretically build its own tools. If it encounters a website it needs to use, it can write a playwright script on the fly to scrape it. That model doesn't need computer use as a built-in feature, it just needs the ability to write and execute code.
This brings us back to Claude Code. It's a terminal-first agent. It's fast, it's lean, and it feels like it's built for work. When I use it, I don't feel like I'm watching a demo. I feel like I'm using a tool. If I tell it to go find something on the web, it doesn't show me a video of it scrolling through Google. It just returns the data. I think there's a psychological component here too. As users, do we want to watch the AI use the computer, or do we just want the result?
Early on, we want to watch. It builds trust. If you see the agent clicking the right things, you feel like it knows what it's doing. It's the same reason early self-driving car visualization showed you every single car and pedestrian the sensors were tracking. It was a, trust me, I see everything, display. Now, as the tech matures, those visualizations are getting simpler. We just want to get to the destination. I think computer use is in that high-trust visualization phase.
I see the button, Corn. Look at me. Click the button. Yeah, I get it. It's the look ma, no hands phase of AI. But once we're over the novelty, the latency is going to start grating on people. If I can do a task in 3 seconds with an API, first agent versus 30 seconds with a visual agent, I'm picking the 3-second option every time. Efficiency eventually wins.
It always does. But let's play devil's advocate for the visual first camp. What about cross-app orchestration? Let's say I want to take a chart from an old legacy Excel file, paste it into a specialized medical imaging software, and then drag the result into a proprietary secure messaging app. None of those have APIs. None of them talk to each other. A computer use agent is the only thing that can sit in the middle and act as the universal glue.
That's the digital janitor use case. It's cleaning up the mess left behind by decades of incompatible software. And I agree, for that you need the pixels. But is that a category, or is it just RPA for the LLM era? We used to call this screen scraping. Now we call it computer use. The branding is definitely better, but the underlying problem is the same. The software we built doesn't talk to other software.
It's definitely RPA for the LLM era, but with one massive difference. Traditional RPA was brittle because it didn't understand intents. It just knew click pixel X, Y. If the UI changed, it failed. An LLM-based agent understands that it's looking for a search bar. It doesn't matter if the search bar moves from the top left to the top right, the vision model will still find it. That semantic resilience is what makes computer use viable in a way that old-school automation never was.
So it's a better RPA, but is it a general purpose agent? That's the pivot point. If I'm OpenAI, am I building Operator to be a specialized tool for enterprise automation, or am I building it to be the way everyone interacts with their computer in 2027? Because if it's the latter, that's a huge bet on the GUI remaining the primary interface for computing.
And that's a risky bet. If agents become the primary way we interact with software, then software will start being built for agents. Why would a developer spend thousands of hours polishing a GUI for a human if 90% of the users are AI agents? You'd be better off exposing a clean, high-speed API and letting the agent handle the UI for the human in whatever way the human prefers: voice, text, or a custom dashboard.
Headless software for a headless world. I like it. It's almost recursive. We're building computer use agents to solve the problem of software being hard for AIs to use, which will eventually lead to software being built so AIs don't have to use the computer like a human. It feels like the visual first approach is an evolutionary dead end that's necessary to get us to the next stage.
It's the skeuomorphism of AI. Remember when the first iPhones had leather-textured calendars and glossy buttons that looked like real physical objects? It helped people transition from the physical world to the digital world. Computer use is skeuomorphic AI. It's the AI pretending to be a human using a mouse and keyboard because that's the world we've built. Once we get comfortable with agents, we'll strip away the human-like interaction and move to pure data exchange.
That's a great way to put it. It's the fake leather stitching of the agentic era. So let's look at the players again with that lens. Anthropic is showing off the stitching. Google Mariner is showing off the stitching. But Claude Code is basically a command line interface that says, I don't need the leather, just give me the data.
And then you have Microsoft. They're in a unique position because they own the OS. They don't need to see the screen via a screenshot. They have direct access to the Windows accessibility tree. They can see every object, every label, and every state change in the OS without ever processing a pixel. Their UFO project UI-focused agent is actually very clever because it sits somewhere in the middle. It's seeing the UI, but it's doing it through the OS's own internal metadata.
That feels like the home field advantage. If Apple does the same with their on-device agents, they aren't really computer use agents in the Anthropic sense. They're OS integrated agents. They're not looking at a picture of the screen. They're looking at the actual code that's rendering the screen. That's infinitely more reliable and faster.
I mean, I didn't say it, I didn't say the word. But you're right. The third-party agents like Anthropic and OpenAI are at a massive disadvantage because they are looking from the outside in. They have to use the pixels because they don't have access to the pipes. If you're Apple or Microsoft, you just use the pipes.
This actually makes the computer use category look even more like a transitional phase for third-party developers. If you don't own the OS, you're forced to use the GUI. But if the OS owners build their own agents, the third-party pixel pushers are going to have a hard time competing on speed or reliability. Why would I use OpenAI Operator to manage my Windows settings when Windows Intelligence can do it natively without the overhead of screenshots?
It's the Sherlocking of the agent world. For those who don't know the term, it's when Apple sees a popular third-party app and just builds that feature into the OS, effectively killing the third-party market. Computer use as a standalone product category is ripe for Sherlocking. The only way it survives is if it becomes a universal bridge that works across every OS and every cloud, which is what I think OpenAI is aiming for with Agent Kit.
One agent to rule them all. It's an ambitious goal, but man, the technical debt of trying to be a universal pixel pusher across Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, and Android. That sounds like a nightmare to maintain. Every time there's a minor OS update that changes a button style, your whole agent fleet could go blind.
Which brings us back to the Model Context Protocol. If we can agree on a way for software to describe its capabilities to an agent, Here is my add rows tool, here is my search tool. Then we don't need the agent to be a visual genius. We just need it to be a good coordinator. I think that's the real long-term play. We're moving from visual interaction to agent to software protocols.
So, to Daniel's question, what is the actual remaining use case for pixel-level GUI interaction? We've got legacy software, we've got QA testing, and we've got digital janitorial work. Is that enough to sustain a multi-billion-dollar product category? Or are we just watching a very expensive fireworks show before the real work moves into the background?
I think it's a feature, not a product. We will look back at dedicated computer use agents, the same way we look at dedicated GPS devices. Remember when you'd have a Garmin or a TomTom stuck to your windshield? It was a revolution. It was a separate category of electronics. Now, it's just a chip in your phone and a map app. The capability of GPS is more important than ever, but the product category is dead.
That's a perfect analogy. Computer use is the Garmin phase. It's useful, it's impressive, but it's inherently redundant once the main device learns how to do it. I can see a future where every LLM has a vision action module as standard, but you'd never buy a standalone computer use agent any more than you'd buy a standalone sentence writing agent.
And for the developers listening, the takeaway here is clear. Don't build your automation on pixels if you can avoid it. If there's an API, use it. If there's an MCP server, use it. If you can use a headless browser with direct DOM access, do that. Reserve the computer use, visual layer for the absolute last resort. The break glass in case of legacy software scenario.
It's the visual fallback model. Start with the protocol, end with the pixel. I think that's the most robust architecture for anyone building in this space right now. Don't get distracted by the flashy demos of cursors moving around. Look at the latency, look at the token cost, and look at the reliability.
What's also interesting is the user in the loop aspect. One thing visual agents are good at is keeping the user informed. If the agent is clicking through a website, I can see what it's doing. If it's just hitting an API in the background, it's a black box to me. For high-stakes tasks like moving money or changing medical records, maybe that visual audit trail is actually a feature, not a bug.
That's a psychological safety factor. I'd rather see the AI log into my bank and show me the screen than just have it say, done. I moved $10,000 to your cousin. But again, is that computer use or is that just a visual log? You could have an API-first agent that generates a visual representation of what it's doing without actually needing to use the pixels to perform the action.
A synthetic audit trail. Now that's an interesting concept. The agent does the work via high-speed API, but it replays the action for you in a GUI so you can verify it. That gives you the speed of the protocol and the trust of the pixel.
It's the best of both worlds. And honestly, it's probably where we'll end up. The computer use agents of today are teaching us what humans find trustworthy and what tasks are actually possible to automate. Once we've mapped out the territory, we'll build a much more efficient highway over it.
I'm curious to see how the open source side of this plays out. Projects like Open Interpreter are so much more flexible because they aren't tied to a specific vendor's vision model. They can swap in a lean, fast model for the CLI stuff and only call the big vision model when they need to see something. That dynamic routing of tasks seems much more sustainable than a vision-only approach.
It's about using the right tool for the job. You don't use a microscope to read a billboard, and you shouldn't use a multi-billion parameter vision model to find a save button that's always in the same place. I think the universal operator dream is a bit of a general AI fantasy, the idea that one model should do everything the way a human does. But computers aren't humans, and they shouldn't have to pretend to be useful.
That's the anthropomorphic trap. We keep trying to make AI act like us because that's the only model of intelligence we have. But the computer use that actually matters is the one that's optimized for the machine's strengths, speed, precision, and parallel processing, not the one that mimics our weaknesses like manual clicking and visual scanning.
Well, I for one am ready for the post-pixel era. I want my agent to be a silent, invisible force that just gets things done. If I never have to see another booking a flight demo again, it'll be too soon. Let's move to the API first world and leave the screenshot and click to the legacy janitors.
I think that's a solid landing spot. The category is transitional. The capability is permanent. We're watching the birth of a new standard library for AI, but the standalone product will likely fade into the background.
So, practical takeaways for the folks at home. If you're a developer, look into MCP, the Model Context Protocol. It's the closest thing we have to a universal translator between agents and software right now. If you can build an MCP tool for your app, you're future-proofing it for a world where agents are the primary users.
And if you're a business leader looking at agentic workforces, don't just buy the splashy computer use demo. Ask about the API fallback strategy. Ask about the cost per task. A vision-first agent might look great in a pilot, but it'll eat your budget alive once you scale it to 1,000 seats. Look for the hybrid providers who prioritize efficiency over optics.
And for everyone else, just enjoy the ride. It's a wild time to be using a computer, whether you're doing the clicking or your AI is. Just maybe don't give your agent your primary credit card without some very strict human-in-the-loop guardrails. I don't care how good the computer use is, I'm not letting a model see my bank account without a chaperone.
Wise words from the sloth. Speaking of chaperones, we should probably wrap this up before we spend our entire token budget on this one conversation.
Good call. This has been a deep one. I feel like we've poked enough holes in the visual first hype to see the light on the other side. It's not that it's bad tech, it's just transitional tech. It's the bridge, not the destination.
The bridge to the future. This has been episode 1942 of My Weird Prompts. I'm Herman Poppleberry.
And I'm Corn. Big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flemingtop, for keeping the wheels on this operation. And of course, a massive thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. They're the real MVPs in the background.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Pixel versus Protocol, debate, do us a favor, and leave a review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps us reach more people who are obsessed with the future of AI.
You can find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We'll be back next time with whatever weirdness Daniel sends our way.
Until then, keep your APIs clean and your pixels sharp.
Or just use the terminal. It's faster. See ya! This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text to speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to